The letter arrived at the university archive just before midnight, sealed in wax so old it crumbled at the slightest touch, and Wendy Parker knew immediately that something about it was wrong. She'd been working late again, cataloging donations in the dusty basement of Thornfield University's historical collection, when the courier, a pale man in an outdated suit who moved too quietly for comfort, placed the wooden box on her desk without a word. He was gone before she could sign for it, vanished into the shadows between flickering fluorescent lights, like he had never existed at all. Wendy stared at the box, her fingers hovering over the aged wood, feeling the strange pull of it. 23 years old, working 2 jobs to pay off student loans, living in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, this was supposed to be her boring Tuesday night. But the moment she lifted the lid and saw the letter inside, yellowed parchment covered in symbols she had never encountered in 4 years of studying dead languages, she knew her life was about to change. The symbols weren't quite Cyrillic, weren't quite runic, but something older, something that made her eyes water when she tried to focus on them too long. Wendy pulled out her phone, snapped photos, cross-referenced every database she had access to. Nothing. Hours passed. Her coffee went cold. The building settled into that deep silence that only comes after midnight, when even the heating system stops its perpetual groaning. She was so focused on the letter that she didn't hear him enter. "You can read it." Wendy's heart slammed against her ribs as she spun in her chair. The man standing in the doorway of the archive room shouldn't have been able to get past 3 locked doors in a security system, but there he was, and the sight of him stole the breath from her lungs. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with hair so white it seemed to glow in the dim light, not the white of age, but pure, luminous white that fell past his shoulders in a straight cascade. His skin was equally pale, like moonlight given form, and his features were sharp enough to cut glass. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips pressed into a grim line. But it was his eyes that held her frozen crimson, deep as blood, ancient as the letter itself. He wore all black, a long coat over what looked like a perfectly tailored suit, expensive and timeless. Who are you? How did you get in here?" Wendy's hand moved toward her phone, but he was suddenly closer, impossibly fast, standing on the other side of her desk. "My name is Konstantin Draev," he said, and his accent was thick, Eastern European, each word precisely enunciated. "And that letter belongs to me. Or rather, it was meant for me 300 years ago." Wendy's logical mind was screaming at her to run, to call security, to do something other than sit there staring at him. But the scholar in her, the part that lived for ancient mysteries and lost languages, was already piecing it together. His appearance, the impossible speed, the way the overhead light seemed to dim in his presence. "You're a vampire," she whispered. "I am the vampire king of the Eastern courts," Konstantin corrected, and there was no arrogance in his tone, only fact. "And you, human scholar, can apparently read a language that has been dead for longer than your country has existed. So I will ask you once more, because I do not have the luxury of patience tonight. Can you read it?" Wendy looked back at the letter, then at him, her mind racing. Every rational part of her knew she should be terrified, but she had spent her entire academic career being dismissed, overlooked, told her specialty in obscure languages was useless. And now a vampire king was standing in front of her, asking for her help. "Maybe," she said carefully. "Some of these symbols, they're similar to Proto-Slavic but mixed with something else. Old Church Slavonic. Or possibly—" She stopped, realizing she was rambling. "Why now? You said it was meant for you 300 years ago." Konstantin's jaw tightened. "Because 3 nights ago, my most trusted advisor was found dead in his chambers, staked through the heart with wood from a rowan tree that only grows in one province, my province. And the night before that, 2 members of my council were killed in an ambush that should have been impossible, because only 5 people knew their route. Someone in my court is betraying me, and that letter," he gestured sharply to the parchment, "was found clutched in my advisor's hand. He died trying to bring it to me." "But you can't read it," Wendy realized. "No, and neither can anyone else I trust, which is currently a very short list." Konstantin moved around the desk, and Wendy caught his scent, something like winter frost in old libraries in danger. "The courier who delivered this to you was compelled to do exactly as my dying advisor instructed. He said to bring it to the human who works with dead words, who can see what others cannot. So here I am, at the mercy of a mortal scholar, because everyone in my own world is suspect. Wendy studied him, this impossibly beautiful, dangerous creature who looked at her like she was his last hope. If I help you, what happens to me after? Do you just make me forget? Kill me to keep your secret? I do not kill those who aid me, Konstantin said flatly, and I do not take memories without consent. You would be under my protection for as long as you required it. That is my word as king. There was something in the way he said it, the absolute certainty that made Wendy believe him. She turned back to the letter, pulled out her notebook, and began to work. The next 2 hours were intense. Konstantin watched her with unwavering attention as she sketched symbols, muttered to herself, cross-referenced ancient texts she pulled from the archives collection. He asked questions occasionally, sharp and intelligent, about specific markings. Despite the situation, Wendy found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of translation work, the puzzle of it consuming her attention. It's a warning, she finally said, sitting back in her chair. Written by someone named, I think it's Mikhail? He was your advisor? Konstantin nodded, something like grief flickering across his face. For 400 years. He discovered something. He says, Wendy traced the letters carefully, making sure she had it right. He says, the betrayer wears the face of family, speaks with the voice of blood. Look to the one who stands closest to your throne, who has coveted it since before the Great War. The evidence lies in the old tongue, in the treaties signed beneath the mountains. Sebastian has played us all. The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly that Wendy could see her breath. Konstantin had gone absolutely still, his eyes blazing crimson fire. Sebastian, he repeated, and his voice was death itself. My brother. Wendy watched him process this, saw the pain and fury warring in his expression. Your brother wants your throne. My brother is the only family I have left, Konstantin said quietly. We fought together in the wars against the hunters, built the peace treaties with the human world, established the council system together. For 800 years he has been at my side. He looked at Wendy, and she saw the devastation beneath his rage. Mikhail must have been mistaken. Or he died to make sure you knew the truth, Wendy said softly. She understood betrayal, understood how it felt when someone you trusted destroyed that faith. Her ex-boyfriend had stolen her research and published it under his name, had cost her a year of work and nearly her entire academic reputation. But this was so much bigger, so much worse. He mentioned evidence, old treaties. Do you know what he meant? Konstantin was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The mountain treaties. They were signed 500 years ago, establishing territories and blood rights. Sebastian was the negotiator. If he falsified something, hid terms that would benefit him. He turned abruptly. I need those treaties. They are kept in the royal vaults beneath the city. Can I see the rest of the letter? Wendy asked. There's more here, but the symbols are damaged. Konstantin moved back to the desk, leaning over her shoulder to look at the parchment. This close, Wendy could feel the cold radiating from him, could see the inhuman perfection of his features. She forced herself to focus on the letter. Here, she pointed. These marks, they're not part of the main language. They're coordinates? No, directions. Beneath the iron cross where the forgotten sleep, the proof awaits in stone and blood. The catacombs, Konstantin breathed. The old burial chambers under the cathedral. They have been sealed for 200 years. Then that's where we go, Wendy said, and was surprised by her own certainty. Konstantin looked at her sharply. We? You need me to read whatever you find. And honestly? Wendy met his eyes, refusing to flinch. This is the most incredible historical discovery I'll ever be part of. I'm not missing it. For the first time, something that might have been a smile ghosted across Konstantin's face. You are either very brave or very foolish, Wendy Parker. Probably both, she admitted. When do we leave? Now. The sun rises in 5 hours. I need to be back in the underground before then. He extended his hand to her. Stay close to me. The streets are not safe for humans at night, even in your modern world. Wendy packed the letter carefully, grabbed her bag, and took his hand. His skin was cold as marble, but surprisingly gentle. What about your brother? Won't he know something's wrong? Sebastian believes I am meeting with the Western Court about the recent murders. I have a few hours before he expects my return. Konstantin led her toward the door, then paused. I should warn you I move faster than humans. It may be disorienting. How fast are we? The world blurred. Wendy gasped as Konstantin swept her into his arms and moved, the archive dissolving into streaks of darkness and light. Wind whipped her hair, cold air stinging her face. She buried her face against his chest, feeling the expensive fabric of his coat, the stone-hard muscle beneath. He smelled like winter and something else, something ancient and wild. When they stopped, they were standing in an alley behind the cathedral, the old stone structure looming above them like a Gothic guardian. Wendy's legs wobbled when Konstantin set her down, and his hand steadied her at the small of her back. "You did better than most," he said. "Some humans vomit." "Give me a minute and I still might," Wendy muttered, but she was already looking around, trying to orient herself. "Where's the entrance?" Konstantin moved to what looked like a solid stone wall, pressed his palm against a specific brick, and whispered something in that same ancient language from the letter. The stone groaned and shifted, revealing a dark passage leading down. "Stay behind me," he ordered, and there was no room for argument in his tone. "If anything attacks, get behind me immediately. Do you understand?" Wendy nodded, her heart pounding. This was insane. She was following a vampire king into ancient catacombs to help him uncover a conspiracy. But she stepped into the darkness anyway, pulling out her phone for light. The passage was narrow and steep, the stairs worn smooth by centuries of use. The air grew colder as they descended, thick with the smell of old earth and stone. Konstantin moved with predatory grace, silent and sure, while Wendy tried not to trip over her own feet. "Why would your brother do this?" she asked quietly, her voice echoing slightly. "After 800 years together?" "Power," Konstantin said simply. "It is always power. The Eastern courts control the largest territory, the richest blood banks, the most influence with the human governments. And I—" He paused, and Wendy saw his shoulders tighten. "I have been considering stepping down. The wars are over, the peace is stable. I thought perhaps it was time to let younger blood lead." "You told your brother this?" 2 months ago. He argued against it, said I was needed, that the courts would descend into chaos without me." Konstantin's laugh was bitter. "I thought he was being loyal. Perhaps he was simply ensuring I stayed alive long enough to die by his design, so he could take the throne by succession rather than challenge." They reached the bottom of the stairs, emerging into a vast underground chamber. Rows of stone coffins lined the walls, carved with names and dates that Wendy's historian brain immediately wanted to catalog. But Konstantin was moving deeper in, following some instinct or memory, and she hurried to keep up. "The Iron Cross," he said, pointing to a far wall where a massive iron crucifix was embedded in the stone. Mikhail was clever. He knew I would understand. They approached the cross together. Konstantin ran his hands over the stone surrounding it, searching. Wendy pulled out the letter, studying the symbols again by her phone's light. "Where the forgotten sleep," she read. "These coffins are labeled, important people. Who would be forgotten?" Konstantin went still. The betrayers. Those who tried to overthrow the courts in the early days. Their names were struck from the records, their coffins unmarked. He moved to a section of the wall where several plain stone boxes sat, covered in dust and cobwebs. "Here." Together they searched. Wendy was acutely aware of the absurdity of her situation, crouching in a vampire catacombs at 2 a.m, helping an immortal king find evidence of his brother's treason. But her hands were steady as she brushed away centuries of dirt from the stone. "Konstantin," she said softly, "look at this." On the side of one coffin, barely visible, were symbols carved into the stone, the same ancient language from the letter. Wendy traced them carefully, her mind working through the translation. Here lies the truth of Sebastian's ambition, sealed in blood and witnessed by the one who loved him. She looked up at Konstantin. "Can we open it?" Konstantin's face was grim. He placed his hands on the lid of the coffin, and Wendy heard the scrape of stone on stone as he pushed. The lid was heavy, clearly meant to stay sealed, but vampire strength was something else entirely. It shifted, then slid aside with a grinding sound that echoed through the chamber. Inside was not a body, but papers. Dozens of documents, preserved in the dry cold of the catacombs, sealed in wax and leather. Konstantin lifted them carefully, his hands trembling slightly. "These are the original mountain treaties," he said, his voice hollow. "And these—" He unfolded another document, and Wendy saw his face go absolutely white. "These are orders, written in Sebastian's hand, orders to attack human villages 500 years ago to break the peace we had just established, the attacks that started the Second Great War." Wendy felt cold understanding dawn. He wanted the war to continue. "He wanted me dependent on him," Konstantin said. "As long as there was war, I needed my general, my advisor. I needed my brother." He sorted through more documents, each one revealing another layer of betrayal. False intelligence, manipulated reports, assassinations disguised as accidents. Mikhail is mentioned here. Mikhail was investigating, getting too close, so Sebastian had him killed and made it look like the work of our enemies. "Why leave the letter?" Wendy asked. "Because Mikhail was smarter than Sebastian gave him credit for," Konstantin said softly. "He knew he was in danger. He prepared insurance, and he knew I would find someone who could read it." He looked at Wendy, and there was such raw pain in his eyes that she wanted to reach for him. "He trusted me to finish what he started." "What will you do?" Wendy asked quietly. Konstantin gathered the documents carefully. "What I must. Sebastian has committed treason against the crown and the courts. The law is clear." His jaw set in a hard line. "But first, I need to get you somewhere safe. When I confront him, he will look for leverage. He will try to use anyone close to me." "I can take care of myself," Wendy protested. "Against a vampire who has lived for 900 years and commanded armies?" Konstantin turned to face her fully. "Wendy, you have helped me more than I can repay. But if he hurts you to get to me, I will never forgive myself. Please." There was something in his voice, a desperate edge that made Wendy realize this was about more than just protecting a witness. She nodded slowly. "Where?" "I have a safe house in the city. It is warded against vampire entry without my permission. You will stay there until this is finished." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "After tonight, if you wish to forget all of this, I will find someone who can help. You can return to your normal life." "What if I don't want to forget?" Wendy asked. Konstantin stared at her, something shifting in his expression. But before he could answer, a sound echoed through the catacombs' footsteps, multiple sets, descending the stairs they had used. "How did they find us?" Wendy whispered. Konstantin's eyes had gone full crimson, his body coiled like a weapon. "Sebastian. He must have had someone watching me." He pressed the documents into Wendy's hands. "Run. There's another passage behind that wall. It leads up to the cathedral's basement. Get out. Get to street level and find a crowd. He will not attack where humans can see." "What about you?" "I am the Vampire King," Konstantin said, and his voice had gone cold and deadly. "I will handle this." But Wendy saw how many footsteps were echoing in the darkness, heard the whisper of movement surrounding them. "There are too many. Go!" Konstantin pushed her toward the wall, and she stumbled back, clutching the documents. He moved to stand between her and the entrance, his body a wall of protection. From the shadows emerged vampires, 6 of them, all dressed in dark clothing, all moving with that predatory grace. And at their center was a vampire who looked achingly similar to Konstantin, white hair, pale skin, crimson eyes. But where Konstantin's features were sharp and cold, this vampire's face held a cruel beauty, a smile that promised violence. "Brother," Sebastian said, and his voice was like poisoned honey. "Out for a midnight stroll in the old tombs? How nostalgic." "Sebastian," Konstantin's voice could have frozen blood, "call off your dogs. This is between us." Sebastian's smile widened. "Is it? Because from where I stand, you have something that belongs to me." His eyes found Wendy, still frozen by the wall. The human scholar. I admit I did not anticipate Mikhail being quite so clever with his little insurance policy. "Tell me, girl, what did the letter say?" Wendy said nothing, her heart hammering, but she met Sebastian's eyes with as much courage as she could muster. "No matter," Sebastian continued. "I can guess. Mikhail always was dramatic. Did he tell you about the treaties, brother? About how I ensured your throne remained stable? You should be thanking me. You started a war that killed thousands, Konstantin said. You murdered my advisor. You have been manipulating the courts for 500 years. I have been keeping you in power. Sebastian's facade cracked, rage bleeding through. Do you think you could have held the Eastern courts without me? Do you think those weak, simpering nobles would have followed you through the wars without my strategies? I built your kingdom, Konstantin. And what is my reward? To stand forever in your shadow, the younger brother, the general, never the king. You could have challenged me honorably, Konstantin said quietly. I would have given you a fair fight. And lost, Sebastian sneered. You have always been stronger, older, more powerful. The only way to take what should be mine is to weaken you first. Destroy your allies, undermine your support, make you vulnerable. And then, when you finally fell, I would be there to catch the crown. It ends tonight, Konstantin said, and his power filled the chamber like a physical force. Wendy felt it press against her skin, cold and vast and ancient. You will face trial before the courts. The evidence will speak for itself. There will be no trial, Sebastian said, and he gestured to his vampires. Kill him, the human too. Make it look like hunter attack. Everything happened at once. The vampires attacked, moving faster than Wendy's eyes could track. Konstantin met them like a storm, his movements so quick and precise they were almost beautiful. But there were 6 against 1, and even a king could be overwhelmed. Wendy clutched the documents and ran for the wall, searching frantically for the hidden passage Konstantin had mentioned. Her hands scraped over stone, finding nothing, panic rising in her throat. Behind her she heard the sounds of fighting snarls, the crack of stone, someone screaming. She risked a glance back and saw Konstantin surrounded, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder, still fighting with terrifying efficiency. He had already taken down 2 vampires, but the others were pressing in, and Sebastian was watching, waiting for his moment. Wendy's fingers found a seam in the stone, a slight depression. She pressed hard, whispering a desperate prayer, and the wall shifted. A narrow opening appeared, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. She looked back one more time. Konstantin had seen her find the passage, and relief flashed across his face. But that moment of distraction cost him. Sebastian moved faster than thought and drove a wooden stake toward Konstantin's chest. "No!" Wendy screamed. Konstantin twisted at the last second, the stake catching his side instead of his heart. He staggered, and Sebastian laughed. Wendy made a decision that was probably insane. Instead of running through the passage to safety, she grabbed the heaviest piece of stone she could lift from a crumbling coffin and threw it as hard as she could at Sebastian's head. Her aim was terrible. The stone flew wide, missing Sebastian by feet, but it was enough of a distraction. Sebastian turned, startled that the human had attacked, and Konstantin used that heartbeat of time to strike. The vampire king moved like death itself, closing the distance between him and his brother in a blur. His hand closed around Sebastian's throat, lifting him off the ground, and his other hand ripped the stake free from his own side. "You betrayed me," Konstantin said, and his voice was empty of everything except grief. "You killed my friend. You would have destroyed everything we built." "I would have made it better," Sebastian choked out, "stronger." "No," Konstantin said, "you would have made it yours." He drove the stake through his brother's heart. Sebastian's scream echoed through the catacombs, high and terrible. His body convulsed once, twice, and then he began to crumble, turning to ash and dust as the stake's poison wood did its work. In seconds, there was nothing left but powder drifting to the stone floor. The remaining vampires, those still conscious, took one look at their dead master and fled into the shadows. Konstantin stood alone in the center of the chamber, covered in blood and dust, breathing hard despite not needing to breathe. Slowly, he turned to look at Wendy. "You did not run," he said. "I'm starting to think I'm really bad at self-preservation," Wendy admitted, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Konstantin crossed to her in 3 strides, and before she could process what was happening, he had pulled her into his arms. He was cold and blood-stained and probably dangerous, but Wendy found herself clinging to him anyway, the documents still clutched in one hand. "You saved my life," Konstantin said against her hair. "You foolish, brilliant human, you saved my life." "You were handling it," Wendy said, but her voice was muffled against his chest. I was about to die, Konstantin corrected. He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. Why did you stay? Wendy met his eyes, those incredible crimson eyes, and realized with startling clarity that somewhere in the last few hours she had stopped being afraid of him. Because you needed help. And because... She trailed off, not sure how to explain the pull she felt, the connection that made no logical sense. Because? Konstantin prompted, and his voice had gone soft. Because I think I'm starting to care what happens to you, Wendy admitted. Konstantin stared at her for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised them both. He leaned down and kissed her. His lips were cold at first, a shock against her warm mouth, but they softened as the kiss deepened. Wendy made a small sound and kissed him back, her free hand fisting in his coat. It was nothing like kissing a human. There was an otherness to it, a sense of vast age and power held carefully in check. But there was also tenderness, a desperate gentleness, like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wendy was breathing hard. Konstantin was just staring at her like he had never seen anything quite like her before. I have lived for over 800 years, Konstantin said quietly. I have fought wars, built kingdoms, loved and lost more times than I can count. But I have never met anyone like you, Wendy Parker. In one night, you have given me back my kingdom and made me feel something I thought I had forgotten. What's that? Wendy whispered. Hope, Konstantin said. And something far more dangerous, the desire for something beyond duty and survival. Wendy knew she should be sensible, should recognize that this was impossible, that they were from different worlds, that it had only been hours. But standing there in the ancient catacombs, covered in vampire politics and old dust, she felt more alive than she had in years. We should probably get out of here, she said finally, before more of them come back. Konstantin nodded, but he did not let her go immediately. Will you come with me? To my residence? There is much to do. I must call a council session, present the evidence, ensure the courts know the truth. It will take time, but I would feel better if you were somewhere I could protect you. Your vampire court is going to love me, Wendy said dryly. Random humans showing up with their king. They will treat you with respect, Konstantin said, and there was steel in his voice. Or they will answer to me. They made their way out of the catacombs together, Konstantin supporting Wendy over the rough ground, Wendy carefully carrying the evidence that had cost so much. The city above was still dark, the sky that peculiar pre-dawn purple, and the streets were quiet. Konstantin led her to a car waiting in an underground garage, a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows. The driver was another vampire, a woman with the same white hair and pale skin, who took one look at her king's blood-stained appearance and Wendy's presence and wisely asked no questions. Take us home, Isolde, Konstantin said, and send word to the council. Emergency session in 1 hour. As they drove through the city streets, Wendy watched the modern world pass by the windows and tried to reconcile it with what she had just experienced. Somewhere in this city, hidden beneath the surface, was an entire society of vampires with their own laws, politics, and power structures. And she had just become tangled in it. What happens now? She asked quietly. Konstantin, who had been staring out his own window, turned to her. Now I clean up the mess my brother left. Some of those vampires who attacked us tonight will have fled back to the court, spreading their version of events. I need to present the evidence quickly, before loyalists can rally. He paused. And I need to decide what to do about the fact that I am apparently quite thoroughly fascinated by a human scholar. Wendy felt her cheeks heat. Is that allowed? In your world? There are no laws against it, Konstantin said, but it is rare. Most vampires view humans as food or playthings, equals, partners, that is... He seemed to struggle for words. Complicated. Complicated seems to be my specialty lately, Wendy said, and was rewarded with another of those almost smiles from him. The car descended into another underground garage, this one clearly private, with armed vampire guards at the entrance. They bowed deeply as Konstantin's car passed, their eyes tracking to Wendy with obvious curiosity. The residence calling it a house seemed woefully inadequate, was built into what must have been an old underground fortress, expanded and modernized over centuries. Vaulted stone ceilings met modern lighting, ancient tapestries hung beside contemporary art. It was a perfect blend of old and new, gothic and sleek, and Wendy could not help but stare as Konstantin led her through corridors lined with history. "My chambers are this way," he said, guiding her with a hand on her lower back. "You can clean up while I meet with the council. Isolde will bring you fresh clothes and anything else you need." "I should be at the meeting," Wendy protested. "I'm the one who translated the letter." Konstantin stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Wendy, what I am about to do is dangerous. I am going to stand before the most powerful vampires in the Eastern courts and accuse my dead brother of treason. Some will believe me. Others will see it as an opportunity to challenge my authority. It could turn violent. All the more reason for me to be there with the evidence," Wendy argued. "You said you needed a witness who wasn't part of your world. I'm that witness." Konstantin studied her for a long moment, and Wendy could see him weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But you stay beside me at all times. If I tell you to leave, you leave. Agreed?" "Agreed," Wendy said. They continued deeper into the residence, finally arriving at a massive door carved with intricate designs. Konstantin pushed it open to reveal a council chamber that looked like something out of a period drama. A long table surrounded by high-backed chairs, lit by chandelier and wall sconces that Wendy suspected had once held candles, but now contained electric lights designed to look like flames. Several vampires were already present, and they all stood as Konstantin entered. Wendy recognized the body language of respect and power, the way they deferred to him even as their eyes tracked to her with intense curiosity. "My lord," one of them said, a tall vampire with scars across his pale face. "We received your summons. There are rumors—" "They are not rumors, Alexander," Konstantin interrupted. He moved to the head of the table, and Wendy followed, acutely aware that every vampire in the room was watching her. "Sebastian is dead by my hand, executed for treason against the crown." The silence was absolute. Then, several vampires started talking at once, their voices rising in shock and anger and confusion. "Silence!" Konstantin's voice cracked like a whip, and the room went quiet again. "I have proof. Wendy?" This was it. Wendy took a breath and stepped forward, laying the documents on the table. She explained in clear, careful terms what she had translated, what they had found in the catacombs, the evidence of Sebastian's centuries of manipulation and betrayal. She could feel the weight of vampire attention on her, predatory and intense, but she kept her voice steady. When she finished, Konstantin spread the documents across the table. "These are the original treaties, with Sebastian's modifications clearly visible. These are his orders to attack human settlements during the peace talks. And these," he placed down the final pages, "are his plans to assassinate me and seize the throne." The vampires leaned in, examining the evidence. Wendy watched their faces, trying to read the inhuman expressions. Some looked horrified, others calculating. "Why should we trust the word of a human?" one vampire finally asked, a woman with elaborate braids in her white hair. "She could have forged these." "Lady Natasha," Konstantin said coldly, "Wendy Parker is a scholar with no knowledge of our world until tonight. She had no reason to forge anything, and Mikhail, who gave his life to expose this betrayal, chose her specifically for her skills. Do you question his judgment?" Natasha subsided, but Wendy could see she was not convinced. Alexander, the scarred vampire, spoke up. "Even if this is true, and I believe it is, my lord, there will be those who supported Sebastian, those who benefited from his schemes. We must root them out quickly, or they will strike." "Agreed," Konstantin said. "I want a full investigation into everyone who worked closely with Sebastian. Audit all treaty negotiations, all military decisions, all council votes for the last 500 years. Anyone found to be complicit will face trial." Another vampire, younger looking, raised his hand hesitantly. "My lord, the human, will she testify before the full courts? The High Council will demand more than our word." "I will testify," Wendy said before Konstantin could answer. "I'll explain what I found and how I translated it, but I'll need time to prepare a full academic analysis of the documents." Several vampires looked startled that she had spoken, but Konstantin nodded. "Wendy will remain under my direct protection as a key witness. Anyone who threatens her answers to me personally." The threat in his voice was clear, and Wendy saw several vampires exchange glances. She realized with a start that they were noticing the way Konstantin stood close to her, the protective edge to his words. They were drawing conclusions. The meeting continued for another hour, logistics and planning and damage control. Wendy tried to follow along, but the vampire politics were complex and centuries deep. She was relieved when Konstantin finally dismissed the council, though several members lingered to speak with him privately. Isolde appeared at Wendy's elbow, the vampire woman who had driven them. "Come," she said, not unkindly. "You look ready to collapse. I will show you to a room where you can rest." Wendy glanced at Konstantin, who was deep in conversation with Alexander. He caught her eye and nodded slightly it was okay to go. She followed Isolde out of the council chamber and through more corridors until they reached a bedroom that was larger than Wendy's entire apartment. "The king's personal guest suite," Isolde explained. "No one will disturb you here. There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit, and the bathroom is through that door. If you need anything, press the button by the bed." "Thank you," Wendy said sincerely. Isolde hesitated at the door. "For what it is worth, you have made quite an impression tonight. I have served Konstantin for 200 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before Wendy could figure out how to respond to that, Isolde was gone. Wendy stood alone in the luxurious room and finally let herself process everything that had happened. Just 12 hours ago, she had been a normal graduate student with a boring life. Now she was standing in a vampire king's residence, having helped uncover a centuries-old conspiracy, and apparently having caught the attention of said king in a way that was making his servants gossip. She should be terrified. She should be demanding to go home, to forget all of this. But as she showered and changed into borrowed clothes, soft black pants, and a deep blue sweater that were indeed her size, somehow Wendy found that what she actually felt was exhilarated. For the first time in years, she felt like she mattered, like her skills were valued for more than just grades on a transcript. And then there was Konstantin. The memory of his kiss in the catacombs, the way he had held her, the quiet intensity in his eyes when he looked at her. This was insane. She barely knew him. He was a vampire, an immortal king, someone who had lived lifetimes while she had barely started hers. But the connection between them felt real, undeniable as gravity. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Konstantin entered, and Wendy's breath caught. He had changed as well, the blood-stained clothes gone, replaced by dark gray pants and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal pale, muscled forearms. His white hair was damp, falling around his face, and without the layers of authority and violence, he looked almost young, despite his 800 years. "I wanted to check on you," he said quietly. "Tonight was difficult. You handled yourself with remarkable composure." "I'm still processing," Wendy admitted. "Parts of my brain are screaming that this is all impossible." Konstantin smiled slightly. "The human mind rebels against the supernatural. It is natural." He moved further into the room, and Wendy was struck again by how graceful he was, every movement controlled and deliberate. "I owe you more than I can express. You gave me the truth when my entire world was built on my brother's lies." "He really fooled you for 800 years?" Wendy asked gently. Konstantin's face shadowed with pain. "I loved him. I trusted him absolutely. It never occurred to me to question his loyalty." He looked away. "Perhaps I did not want to see. It is easier to believe in the people we love than to acknowledge their betrayal." Wendy understood that bone deep. "My ex-boyfriend stole my research," she said quietly. "Published it as his own work. I had trusted him, worked with him, thought we were partners. Finding out he had been using me the whole time." She shook her head. "It made me question everything, my judgment, my worth, whether I could ever trust anyone again." Konstantin looked at her with something like understanding. "How did you move forward?" "I threw myself into work, built walls, decided that being alone was safer than being hurt." Wendy met his eyes. "But I think maybe I was just existing, not living. Tonight, as terrifying as it was, I felt alive. I felt like I mattered." "You do matter," Konstantin said intensely. "You matter to the courts, to the investigation. And you." He crossed to stand in front of her, close enough that Wendy had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. You matter to me, in ways I'm only beginning to understand." "We barely know each other," Wendy whispered, but she did not move away. "I have known you for hours, and I feel like I have been searching for you for centuries," Konstantin said. "That should frighten me. It probably frightens you, but I cannot deny what I feel when I look at you, this pull, this fascination. I want to know everything about you, your favorite books, how you take your coffee, what made you choose to study dead languages. I want to hear you laugh. I want to watch you work, see your mind solve impossible puzzles. I want—" He stopped, clearly struggling. "I want more than I have wanted in a very long time." Wendy's heart was pounding so hard, she thought he must be able to hear it. "I don't know how this could work. You're immortal. I'm human. Your world and mine are so different." "All true," Konstantin agreed, "but that does not change what I feel. And if you feel even a fraction of this pull between us, then perhaps we owe it to ourselves to explore it, to see what this could become." "What if I can't keep up with your world?" Wendy asked. "What if I'm just a distraction, a novelty that wears off?" Konstantin reached up, cupping her face gently with one cold hand. "You are brilliant, brave, and stubborn enough to argue with a vampire king. You deciphered a language that has been dead for centuries and helped me save my kingdom. You are not a distraction, Wendy Parker. You are extraordinary." Wendy closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Every rational part of her was screaming warnings, but her heart was singing a different tune. "I'm probably making a huge mistake," she murmured. "Probably," Konstantin agreed, but there was warmth in his voice now. "Will you make it anyway?" Wendy opened her eyes and found him watching her with such hope, such careful vulnerability, that she could not have said no if she wanted to. "Yes," she whispered. Konstantin's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from coldly beautiful to breathtaking. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her softly. This kiss was different from the one in the catacombs, less desperate, more tender, a promise rather than a declaration. When they broke apart, Konstantin rested his forehead against hers. "The sun will rise soon," he said quietly. "I must rest during the day. Will you stay here? There are books in my personal library, food in the kitchen. Isolde will make sure you have everything you need." "Where do you sleep?" Wendy asked, then blushed. "I mean, is it the coffin thing, or—" Konstantin laughed, and the sound was rich and genuine. "No coffins. I have a chamber that is completely light-proof, with a rather comfortable bed. The stories about us sleeping in coffins were started by humans who found our early hiding places in crypts." "So many vampire myths to unpack," Wendy said, smiling. "You're going to have to teach me." "I would be honored," Konstantin said, "and in return you can teach me about your world. I have lived so long in the shadows that I have forgotten what it is to walk freely in the light, even metaphorically." They stood there together, neither wanting to break the moment, until Konstantin finally sighed. "I must go. But Wendy, thank you. For everything." "Get some sleep," Wendy said. "We both need it." Konstantin left reluctantly, and Wendy climbed into the enormous bed, her mind spinning. She should not be able to sleep, should be too wired from everything that had happened. But exhaustion pulled her under quickly, and she dreamed of ancient catacombs and crimson eyes and cold hands that held her gently. She woke to late afternoon, sun filtering through curtains. The room had windows, she realized, high and narrow, but letting in slanted light. Someone had left a tray of food by the bed, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, coffee that was somehow still hot. Wendy ate gratefully, her stomach reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday's lunch. Isolde appeared when she finished, seemingly summoned by some sixth sense. "Good, you are awake. The king left instructions that you are free to explore the residence, though he asks that you do not leave the warded areas, for your safety." "When will he wake?" Wendy asked. "Sunset is in 2 hours. He will come find you then." Isolde smiled slightly. "He left you something in his study. First door on the left down the hall." Curious, Wendy followed the directions and found herself in a room that was clearly Konstantin's personal space. Dark wood furniture, walls lined with books in multiple languages, a desk covered in papers and maps. And on the desk, set carefully aside, was a box. Wendy opened it to find a beautiful fountain pen, clearly antique, with a note in precise handwriting. "For the scholar who saved a kingdom." May you use this to write many more translations. K. She traced the pen reverently, touched by the gesture. Then her eyes caught on the papers scattered across the desk, more documents in that ancient language, these ones looking like personal letters. Her historian's curiosity got the better of her, and she began to read. They were correspondence between Konstantin and someone named Tatiana, dated over 100 years ago. Love letters, Wendy realized with a pang. A vampire woman he had clearly cared for deeply. The letters spoke of battles fought together, plans for peace, dreams of a future, and then they stopped abruptly. She was killed by vampire hunters, Konstantin's voice said from the doorway, and Wendy jumped. He moved into the room, fully awake despite the sun still being up. A group of humans who decided all vampires were monsters worthy of execution. They caught her during the day when she was vulnerable. By the time I found her, it was too late. I'm sorry, Wendy said softly. I shouldn't have been snooping. You are a scholar. It is your nature to be curious. Konstantin came to stand beside her, looking down at the letters. I kept these to remind myself why the peace between our species matters, why the work I do is important. Tatiana believed humans and vampires could coexist. She died for that belief. Is that why you worked so hard on the treaties? Wendy asked. In part. And because I was tired of war, tired of losing people I loved to senseless violence. He turned to look at her. You remind me of her in some ways. The same fierce intelligence, the same courage. But you are also utterly yourself, and I find myself drawn to you for entirely different reasons. I'm not competing with a ghost, Wendy said quietly. I am not asking you to, Konstantin replied. Tatiana was a century ago. I mourned her, learned from loving her, and moved forward. But I have not allowed myself to feel deeply for anyone since. The risk seemed too great. Until you. Wendy set down the letters carefully. Your world is dangerous. I understand that now. I could be a liability to you. Or you could be my greatest strength, Konstantin countered. Wendy, I am not asking you to make any promises or decisions right now. I am simply asking you to stay, to let me know you, to see where this connection leads. I have a life, Wendy said, but it sounded weak even to her. A job, responsibilities, student loans. And I would never ask you to give those up, Konstantin said. But perhaps there is room in your life for something more, someone who values your mind and your courage, who wants to protect you and support you, who finds himself thinking about you every moment he is apart from you. Wendy looked up at him. This ancient, powerful being who was asking so tentatively for a chance. You're really not good at casual, are you? I have lived 800 years, Konstantin said with a slight smile. I no longer have time for casual. Despite everything, Wendy laughed. Okay, I'll stay, at least until the full council meeting. After that, we'll see. The relief on Konstantin's face was palpable. He pulled her close and Wendy went willingly, resting her head against his chest. She could not hear a heartbeat. He did not have one, but there was something soothing about his solidity, his strength. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. They spent the rest of the evening together. Konstantin showed her more of the residence, explained the wards that protected it, introduced her to other members of his household, all vampires who served him with clear loyalty and respect. He answered her endless questions about vampire nature, their society, their history. In turn, Wendy talked about her work, her passion for languages, her dreams of someday teaching at a university. You could teach here, Konstantin suggested. We have young vampires who need to understand the old languages, the ancient texts. Your skills would be invaluable. Teaching vampires, Wendy mused. That would be a unique line on my resume. Consider it, Konstantin said seriously. I meant what I said about finding a place for you in my world, if you want it. That night, the full High Council, convened representatives from all the vampire courts across the continent, gathered to hear the evidence against Sebastian. Wendy stood before them, dozens of ancient vampires, and presented her translation with as much academic rigor as she could muster. She showed her work, explained her methodology, walked them through each document. Some vampires were skeptical. Others were openly hostile, clearly allied with Sebastian's faction. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Konstantin's authority as king was absolute. By the end of the night, the council had voted to officially condemn Sebastian's actions and support Konstantin's execution of him. Those who had worked with Sebastian were identified and would face their own trials. It was a victory, but it left Konstantin exhausted, and Wendy wrung out from the stress of being examined by so many predatory eyes. "Is it always like this?" she asked as they finally retreated to his private chambers. "Politics? Unfortunately, yes." Konstantin poured himself a glass of something dark blood, Wendy realized with a start, though it looked clinical and packaged. "We source it ethically now," he explained, seeing her expression. "Blood banks, willing donors who are compensated. The days of hunting humans are long past, at least in my territory." "That's good," Wendy said, trying to adjust to yet another aspect of vampire reality. Konstantin smiled. "I appreciate you trying not to look disturbed." "It's your nature," Wendy said. "I can't judge you for that any more than you judge me for eating meat." "A pragmatic view," Konstantin said approvingly. He set down the glass and came to sit beside her on the couch in his sitting room. The council meeting went as well as could be expected. There will be some resistance from Sebastian's old allies, but nothing I cannot handle. You were brilliant, by the way. The way you presented the evidence, answered their challenges, you won over several skeptics. "I just told the truth," Wendy said. "In our world, truth is a rare commodity," Konstantin replied. "You have no idea how valuable that makes you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Wendy found herself studying Konstantin's profile, the sharp lines of his face, the way his white hair caught the lamplight, the surprising gentleness in his expression when he thought she was not looking. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That this is the strangest week of my life," Wendy admitted, "and that despite all the danger and the impossibility of it, I'm happier than I've been in years." Konstantin turned to face her fully. "I feel the same. You have brought something into my life that I did not know I was missing: lightness, hope, the sense that there is more to existence than duty and survival." "Konstantin," Wendy said carefully, "what happens when the investigation is over? When the trials are done and you don't need a translator anymore? What happens to us?" "What do you want to happen?" he asked instead of answering. Wendy took a breath, deciding to be brave. "I want to keep seeing you. I want to learn more about your world, and I want you to be part of mine. I want to see if this feeling between us is real or just adrenaline and proximity." "It is real," Konstantin said with certainty. "At least for me. I have existed long enough to know the difference between infatuation and genuine connection. But I understand your need for time and certainty." "So we date?" Wendy said, and almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Is that even something vampire kings do?" "This vampire king will," Konstantin said firmly. "I will court you properly, Wendy Parker. I will take you to dinner, though I cannot eat. I will walk with you through the city at night, show you the places humans never see. I will read your favorite books and learn what makes you laugh, and I will wait, as long as you need, for you to decide if you can accept a future with someone like me." "Someone like you," Wendy repeated. "You mean immortal, dangerous, and ruling an entire supernatural society?" "Yes," Konstantin said simply. Wendy considered this. The logical part of her brain was still screaming warnings about the impossibility of it all, but her heart was louder, insisting that this was right, that this man, this vampire, was worth the risk. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's try this. But I have conditions." Konstantin raised an eyebrow, looking intrigued. "Name them." "I keep my job and my independence," Wendy said. "I'm not going to be some kept human in a vampire's mansion. I have goals and a career I care about." "Agreed," Konstantin said immediately. "I would never ask you to give up your ambitions." "And you have to be honest with me," Wendy continued, "about the dangers, about vampire politics, about anything that might affect me. No protecting me by keeping me in the dark." "That one may be harder," Konstantin admitted. "My instinct is to shield you from the darker aspects of my world, but I will try. You deserve honesty." "And we go slow," Wendy finished. "I know you're used to operating on a centuries-long timeline, but I'm human. I need time to process all of this." "Slow," Konstantin agreed, though there was amusement in his voice. "I will do my best, though I confess patience has never been my strongest virtue when it comes to things I want." "What do you want?" Wendy asked softly. Konstantin reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his cold fingers gentle against her skin. You. In every way I can have you, but I will wait, because you are worth waiting for. The intensity in his eyes made Wendy's breath catch. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. This kiss was different from the others, slower, deeper, a genuine exploration. Konstantin made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand cupping the back of her head, the other at her waist. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Well, Wendy was breathing hard. Konstantin was just staring at her like she had hung the moon. I should go, Wendy said reluctantly. Back to the guest room. Slow, remember? I remember, Konstantin said, but he did not look happy about it. Though I will note that having you sleep down the hall is going to test my considerable self-control. Wendy stood, smoothing down her borrowed clothes, and Konstantin rose with her. He walked her to the door of his chambers, and they stood there awkwardly for a moment, like teenagers after a first date. Good night, Konstantin, Wendy said. Good night, Wendy, he replied. Then, softer, sleep well, and know that I will be thinking of you. Wendy made it back to her room in a daze, her lips still tingling from the kiss. She climbed into bed and lay there in the darkness, processing everything that had happened over the past few days. Her entire life had been turned upside down, thrown into a supernatural world she had never known existed. And somehow, impossibly, she was falling for a vampire king. The next weeks fell into a strange but wonderful rhythm. During the days, while Konstantin slept, Wendy returned to her apartment, went to her job at the university, tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. But her evenings were spent in the vampire residence, working with Konstantin on the ongoing investigation, meeting with council members, translating more documents that had been hidden away. And in the quiet hours, after the work was done, they talked. Konstantin told her stories of centuries past, of wars and loves and losses. Wendy shared her own much shorter history, her childhood, her dreams, her fears. They discovered shared interests. Both loved literature, though Konstantin had actually met some of the authors Wendy studied. They debated philosophy, politics, the nature of immortality versus human mortality. Konstantin courted her exactly as promised. He took her to a vampire-owned restaurant where the food was exquisite and the clientele exclusively supernatural. He showed her hidden parts of the city underground galleries where vampire artists displayed their work, night markets where both humans and vampires mingled under careful treaties, a library that housed books dating back millennia. He was careful with her, always conscious of his strength, his nature, but he was also passionate, stealing kisses when they were alone, holding her hand as they walked through shadowed streets, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his long existence. Wendy fell harder with each passing day. She started keeping clothes at the residence, spending more nights there than in her own apartment. Her roommates noticed, asked questions she deflected with vague answers about seeing someone. Her advisor at the university commented on how distracted she seemed. Though her work had never been better, she was energized, inspired, translating texts at a speed that surprised even herself. 2 months after that first night in the catacombs, Konstantin invited her to a formal vampire gathering, a celebration of the peace treaty's anniversary. It will be all the courts, he warned. Everyone will want to meet the human who helped expose Sebastian's betrayal. And they will be watching how I treat you, drawing conclusions about our relationship. What conclusions are there to draw? Wendy asked. Konstantin pulled her close, and they were in his study, surrounded by books and soft lamplight. That you are mine, he said quietly, and I am yours. That I have not felt this way about anyone in over a century, and I have no intention of letting you go. Wendy's heart stuttered. Is that what you want? For me to be yours? Yes, Konstantin said simply, in whatever way you will have me. As your lover, your partner, your protector, I know the complications. You are human, I am not. You will age, and I will remain as I am. But I want whatever time we can have together, Wendy. I want decades with you, even knowing I will have to watch you grow old while I stay frozen. There are ways around that, aren't there? Wendy asked carefully. Turning someone. Konstantin went very still. Yes, but it is not a decision to be made lightly, Becoming a vampire means giving up the sun, giving up much of your humanity. It means living forever, watching everyone you knew die. It is both a gift and a curse. Would you do it, if I asked? Wendy was not sure why she was asking, not sure she was ready for the answer. If you asked, if you were certain, if you understood fully what it meant, yes, Konstantin said. I would turn you myself and bind you to me for eternity. But Wendy, you are 23. You have barely lived yet. I would not take your human life from you prematurely. But someday, Wendy pressed. Someday, Konstantin agreed. If you still want this, want me, then we will have that conversation seriously. But not now. Now I just want you as you are, human, brilliant, infuriating, perfect. Wendy kissed him to stop the flow of words, and he responded immediately, pulling her tight against him. These kisses were becoming more heated, more desperate. They had been taking things slow, but the tension between them was building, and Wendy knew they were approaching a tipping point. Come with me to the gathering, Konstantin said when they broke apart. Stand at my side as my partner. Let the vampire world see what you mean to me. I'll need a dress, Wendy said, smiling. I don't think my archive work clothes will cut it. Already arranged, Konstantin said, looking pleased with himself. Isolde has been conspiring with a designer who specializes in formal wear. You have a fitting tomorrow. The dress, when Wendy saw it, was breathtaking deep midnight blue that brought out her eyes, with delicate beading that caught the light like stars. It was elegant and sophisticated, making her look older, more refined. When she wore it the night of the gathering, Konstantin stopped dead when he saw her. You are stunning, he said, his voice rough. The most beautiful thing I have seen in 800 years. You're biased, Wendy said, but she was blushing. I am honest, Konstantin corrected. He was in formal wear himself, all black with silver details, his white hair pulled back, looking every inch the vampire king. He offered her his arm. Ready to face the courts? Not even remotely, Wendy admitted, but let's do it anyway. The gathering was held in a massive underground ballroom that Wendy had not known existed, carved from stone and lit by thousands of candles, real ones, creating a flickering, romantic atmosphere. Vampires filled the space, all dressed in formal wear, all impossibly beautiful and dangerous. Human servants moved through the crowd with trays of drinks and blood, and Wendy noticed that some humans wore collars marked as belonging to specific vampires under their protection. Konstantin kept her close as they entered, his hand at the small of her back. Conversations stopped as vampires turned to look at them, tracking the vampire king and his human companion with intense curiosity. Ignore them, Konstantin murmured. They are simply curious. You are safe here. But Wendy could feel the weight of their attention, the assessment. She lifted her chin and met the stares with as much confidence as she could muster. They made their way through the crowd, Konstantin stopping to speak with various court leaders, introducing Wendy each time. She shook hands with vampires whose names she had only heard in stories, trying to remember everyone and stay calm. You're handling this remarkably well, Alexander, the scarred vampire from the council, commented. He had become an ally over the past weeks, one of Konstantin's most trusted advisors. Most humans are terrified at their first formal gathering. I am terrified, Wendy admitted. I'm just good at hiding it. Alexander laughed, and several nearby vampires turned to look, surprised. I see why Konstantin favors you. You are honest in a world of deception. As the evening wore on, Wendy gradually relaxed. The vampires were formal but not hostile, and several expressed genuine interest in her work. She found herself in a conversation about ancient languages with a vampire scholar who had lived through the periods she studied, and it was fascinating beyond words. But then a vampire approached a woman with sharp features and cold eyes, dressed in blood-red silk. So this is the human pet, she said, and her voice dripped condescension. How quaint. Konstantin, who had been speaking with another court leader, turned immediately, his eyes flashing crimson. Lady Ekaterina, I trust you are enjoying the gathering. I was, Ekaterina said, until I saw you parading your human around like she belongs here. Really, Konstantin, have you no pride, flaunting this relationship to the entire court? Wendy is here as my invited guest and partner, Konstantin said coldly. You will treat her with the respect due to anyone under my protection, or you will leave. Your protection, Ekaterina sneered. Is that what we are calling it? How long before you tire of this novelty? How long before? Enough. Konstantin's voice was absolute ice. You are dismissed, Ekaterina. Leave this gathering immediately. The ballroom had gone quiet, everyone watching. Ekaterina looked shocked, then furious. But she could not disobey a direct order from the king. She turned and swept away, her exit dramatic. Konstantin turned to Wendy, concern in his eyes. I apologize. She has no right. I'm fine, Wendy interrupted, though her hands were shaking slightly. I knew not everyone would accept this. Accept it or not, they will respect you, Konstantin said firmly. You are mine to protect, and I will not tolerate insults. The gathering continued, but the confrontation had shifted something. Other vampires approached Wendy with more deference, more genuine interest. It was clear that Konstantin's public defense of her had sent a message she was not a temporary amusement, but someone the king valued deeply. Later, when they finally returned to the residence, Konstantin pulled Wendy into his arms. I am sorry for Ekaterina's behavior. She has always been ambitious and cruel. You defended me, Wendy said simply, in front of everyone. That meant everything. I will always defend you, Konstantin said fiercely. You are precious to me, Wendy, more precious than you know. They stood there in the entrance hall, holding each other, and Wendy felt the last of her doubts dissolve. This was real. This connection, this impossible relationship, it was real, and it was worth fighting for. Stay with me tonight, Konstantin said quietly. Not in the guest room. Here, with me. Wendy pulled back to look at him. Slow, remember? I know, I'm not asking for anything more than your presence, Konstantin said. I want you close. I want to hold you while we rest. Is that acceptable? Wendy's answer was to kiss him, deep and sure. Yes, she whispered against his lips. They ended up in Konstantin's private chambers, a room Wendy had never entered before. It was surprisingly warm despite being underground, decorated in dark colors and rich fabrics. The bed was enormous, covered in black silk sheets. Konstantin lent her clothes to sleep in, and they lay together in the darkness, Wendy tucked against his cold chest, his arms around her protectively. I never thought I would have this again, Konstantin murmured, this feeling of peace, of contentment. You have given me something beyond price, Wendy Parker. You've given me the same, Wendy said, purpose, adventure, a sense that I matter, and something I never expected to find love. She felt Konstantin go still. Love? Wendy took a breath, knowing she was laying her heart bare. I'm in love with you, Konstantin. I know it's fast, I know it's impossible in so many ways, but I can't deny what I feel. Konstantin rolled them, so he was looking down at her, his white hair falling around them like a curtain, his crimson eyes glowing in the darkness. I love you, he said, each word deliberate. I have loved you since you threw a rock at my brother to save my life. I have loved you through every translation, every debate, every moment you have been brave and brilliant. I love you, Wendy, and I will love you for as long as you will let me. They kissed then, deep and passionate, and Wendy felt like her heart might burst with the intensity of it. They held each other through the night, not sleeping, just talking and touching and existing together. As dawn approached, Konstantin held her tighter. I must rest soon. The sun will rise. I know, Wendy said. I'll be here when you wake. Promise me, Konstantin said urgently. Promise me you will not leave, that you will stay, that we will face whatever comes together. I promise, Wendy said, sealing it with a kiss. And she meant it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the complications of a human-vampire relationship, the politics of the courts, the question of her mortality versus his immortality, they would face them together. The investigation into Sebastian's conspiracy concluded over the following months. Several vampires were tried and found guilty of complicity, sentenced according to vampire law. The treaties were rewritten, the power structures adjusted. Peace was maintained, strengthened even by the revelation and purging of corruption. Wendy continued her work at the university, though she now also served as an official consultant to the vampire courts, translating ancient documents and advising on historical matters. It was dream job, combining her academic passions with real-world impact. And through it all, her relationship with Konstantin deepened. They moved past courtship into true partnership, spending every possible moment together. Wendy kept her apartment for appearance's sake, but she lived mostly at the vampire residence in Konstantin's chambers, in his arms. They talked often about the future, about the choices that lay ahead. Konstantin never pressured her about turning, but Wendy found herself considering it more seriously as time passed. The thought of losing him, of aging while he stayed forever young, was unbearable. But she was also not ready to give up the son, not ready to make that permanent choice. "When you are 30, Konstantin suggested one evening as they lay together, "we will talk about it seriously. That gives you 7 more years to live as a human, to be sure this is what you want. And if you decide then that you want to be turned, I will do it gladly." "And if I decide I want to stay human?" Wendy asked. "Then we will have whatever time we have," Konstantin said simply. "I would rather have a handful of decades with you as you are than centuries without you." Wendy kissed him, overwhelmed by the depth of his commitment. "I think I'll want to be turned," she admitted. "I can't imagine an eternity without you. But you're right, I need time to be sure." "Then time you shall have," Konstantin said. 1 year after that first night in the archive, Konstantin threw a private celebration, just the two of them, in his chambers, with wine and blood and cake that only Wendy could eat. "Happy anniversary," he said, presenting her with a small box. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring, but something else. A silver band engraved with symbols in that ancient language she had first translated. "What does it say?" she asked, though she could probably read it herself now. "You are my heart, my hope, my home," Konstantin translated. "It is a promise, Wendy, a promise that you are mine and I am yours for as long as we both exist. When you are ready, if you want it, I will give you a different ring. But for now, this is my vow to you." Wendy slipped the ring on, and it fit perfectly. "I love you," she said simply. "And I love you," Konstantin replied, "my brilliant, brave human, my savior and my heart." They made love that night for the first time, and it was everything Wendy had dreamed, intense and tender, passionate and careful. Konstantin was constantly aware of his strength, his nature, but Wendy urged him on, wanting all of him, every aspect. Afterward, lying tangled together in silk sheets, Wendy traced patterns on his pale chest and felt completely, perfectly content. "No regrets?" Konstantin asked quietly. "Not a single one," Wendy said honestly. The years that followed were the happiest of Wendy's life. She thrived in her dual role as academic and vampire consultant, published papers that carefully avoided mentioning the supernatural while using her unique insights. She became a recognized expert in ancient languages, respected in her field. Her relationship with Konstantin remained strong, weathering the occasional challenge from vampire politics or human suspicion. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs. Konstantin was protective but never controlling, supporting her independence while making clear that she was his most precious priority. Wendy brought lightness into his ancient life, reminding him how to laugh, how to find joy in small moments. When Wendy turned 30, they had the conversation. She was ready. She wanted eternity with him, wanted to stand truly as his equal in the vampire world, wanted to never have to worry about losing him to the ravages of time. "Are you certain?" Konstantin asked, holding her face gently. "There is no going back from this." "I'm certain," Wendy said firmly. "Turn me, make me yours in every way." Konstantin kissed her deeply, and she tasted his emotion, love and joy, and a hint of fear that he might hurt her. But when he drew back, his eyes were resolved. "It will hurt," he warned. "The venom burns as it changes you, but I will be with you through every moment." "I trust you," Wendy said simply. Konstantin turned her that night in his chambers with ceremony and care. He drank from her first, carefully controlled, taking just enough. Then he opened his own wrist with a sharp nail and held it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded gently, and Wendy did. The blood was strange, cold, and metallic, but also rich, powerful. She felt it spread through her system like fire, burning and remaking. Konstantin laid her on the bed and held her as the change took hold, whispering reassurances in multiple languages, stroking her hair, his presence the only thing keeping her anchored as her body died and was reborn. It took 3 days, 3 days of fever and pain and transformation. And through it all, Konstantin never left her side. When Wendy finally woke, she was different. The world looked sharper, clearer. She could hear things she had never noticed: the movement of air through the underground residence, conversations happening rooms away. She felt strong, powerful, like she could run forever and never tire. And she was hungry, terribly, achingly hungry. "Easy," Konstantin said, and he was there instantly, holding a glass of blood, medical blood, ethically sourced. "Drink slowly, your body needs to adjust." Wendy drank, and it was the best thing she had ever tasted. The hunger eased, replaced by satisfaction, and she finally looked up at Konstantin with her new eyes, eyes that she knew must now be crimson like his. "How do you feel?" he asked carefully. Wendy took stock. The pain was gone, replaced by this new vitality. She could sense Konstantin in a way she never had before, feel his power, his age, his love for her like a tangible thing. "Different," she said, and her voice sounded different too, clearer somehow. "But good, strong." Konstantin's relief was palpable. "You are beautiful," he said. "Your skin, your hair, you look like you were always meant to be this." Wendy stood on legs that felt strange but powerful and moved to a mirror. The woman looking back was her, but also not white blonde hair where once it had been brown, pale skin, crimson eyes. She looked like a vampire queen. "We match now," she said, turning to Konstantin with a smile. He crossed to her, pulled her close. "You are mine," he said fiercely. "My mate, my queen, my eternal companion. And I am yours, Wendy, for all the centuries to come." Wendy kissed him, reveling in the fact that she was now strong enough to match his passion, fast enough to keep up with his movements. They made love again, and it was different now. She could feel his pleasure as if it were her own, their bond deepened by the shared blood. The vampire courts officially recognized Wendy as Konstantin's mate and consort, giving her a title and position in the hierarchy. She continued her work with ancient texts, now with literally all the time in the world to pursue her research. She and Konstantin traveled, visiting vampire courts around the globe, seeing wonders both human and supernatural. They faced challenges. Certainly there were vampires who resented a turned human rising so high, humans who saw vampires as monsters. But together, they navigated every obstacle, their love only growing stronger with each passing decade. 50 years after that first night in the archive, Wendy and Konstantin stood together on a balcony overlooking the city at night, watching the lights twinkle like earthbound stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Konstantin asked. "Giving up your human life?" Wendy looked at him, her mate, her love, her eternal companion. His face was exactly as it had been that first night, cold and beautiful and familiar. Her own face was now equally unchanging, frozen in immortal youth. "Never," she said honestly. "You gave me the world, Konstantin. Adventure, purpose, love beyond measure. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Konstantin pulled her close, and they stood there together, two immortal beings who had found in each other something neither had expected: hope, joy, and a love that would truly last forever. The vampire king had learned who had betrayed him, had brought justice to his court, had secured peace for his people. But more importantly, he had found something far more valuable than any throne or crown. He had found his heart's home in a brilliant human scholar who had been brave enough to read a letter written in a dead language and change both their destinies forever. And Wendy Parker, turned from human to vampire, from scholar to queen, from alone to beloved, knew that she had found her place in the world, not in dusty archives or university halls, but at the side of an ancient king who loved her beyond reason and time. Together, they would face eternity. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were home. The letter had brought them together, but love had bound them for all time. And in the end, that was the greatest magic of all.